I used to believe my life was ordinary, right up until the day I discovered how deeply I'd been undervalued in my own family. I never imagined I'd walk away from my mother, but sometimes truths come crashing down so hard that you can't keep pretending everything is fine. Even now, I can still picture the day it all started to unravel. I was in her living room, sifting through her cluttered coffee table for an insurance form when I stumbled on her will. My heart pounded the moment I saw the words "Last Will and Testament." I knew I shouldn't pry, but a small voice urged me forward. One quick glance wouldn't hurt, I told myself. Yet that single act changed my life in ways I could never have predicted. She was napping in the bedroom after a rough morning. Her back had been acting up, and I'd brought her heat patches and massaged her shoulders to ease the pain. When I picked up the will, my hands trembled. The first page mentioned my sister Danielle, and my stomach twisted. The further I read, the more my cheeks burned. Danielle was the sole beneficiary to everything: Mom's house, her savings, even her old antiques from Grandma. There was only a short clause about any sentimental items that might go to me if I wanted them. That was it. It felt like someone had punched me in the gut. I tried not to jump to conclusions, but the words wouldn't leave my mind. Sole beneficiary. It was as if all my efforts had been rendered invisible. I'd always known Danielle was the golden child. From the moment we were kids, she shone. She excelled at ballet, then music, then art. Everyone said she had a bright future. Meanwhile, I was the practical daughter who slipped into the background, there to tidy up the aftermath of Danielle's triumphs. Whenever there was an errand, a chore, or a late-night rescue needed, Mom called me. I used to think that was my role, to be the reliable one, the steady hand nobody applauded. But discovering the will felt like a slap in the face that said, "You're good for helping, but not worth a single real thing." Mom stirred in the next room, coughing softly, and I quickly put the document back. Guilt warred with anger, tangling in my chest until I could hardly breathe. I forced a casual expression on my face when she shuffled into the living room, leaning on the walker I'd helped her pick out 2 weeks ago. She thanked me for finding her insurance forms, then asked if I could heat up some soup. My body moved on autopilot as I poured the broth into a pot. The kitchen smelled of thyme and onions, but I couldn't taste or smell anything except my own fury. I didn't dare confront her right away. She looked frailer than usual, and I knew a fight might send her blood pressure soaring. Still, my mind was spinning with questions. How long had she planned to leave me out? Did Danielle know? That night, I tossed and turned in bed, replaying every slight, every moment of blatant favoritism I'd swallowed over the years. All those times Danielle got the new clothes, the fancy art classes, the heartfelt praise. I told myself it was fine. I wanted to be the bigger person, the one who supported her sister's passions. But something about that made every wound bleed again. By the time morning light seeped through my curtains, I decided I couldn't keep this secret. I had to hear Mom's explanation. I drove to her house early, my stomach twisting. She was in a recliner, flipping through channels. When she saw me, she gave a thin-lipped smile and asked if I could run to the store for her medication. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to speak calmly. "Mom, I need to talk to you first. Yesterday, I found your will." The remote in her hand dropped onto her lap. She stared at me, unblinking. I pushed forward. "I noticed you're leaving everything to Danielle. I'd like to know why." She pressed her lips together. Her eyes were guarded, her shoulders tense. "That's my personal business," she said flatly. "You had no right to go poking through my documents." My heart thumped so hard I was sure she could hear it. "I was looking for your insurance card, which you asked me to do," I replied, my voice shaking. "I didn't mean to invade your privacy, but it's too late now. I can't pretend I didn't see it. I just want to understand." She shifted in her seat, glancing at the TV. "Danielle needs the help more than you do," she said at last. "You have a steady job. You're settled. She has artistic talent. She struggles to make ends meet, and she has a bright future if she just gets the right support." Her words stung, each one like a jab in my chest. "So, you think she deserves everything because she's more special? That's what you've always believed, isn't it? That I'm just the ordinary one who can handle myself, while Danielle is the golden child." Mom's gaze flickered. I saw a shadow of discomfort there, but she stuck to her stance. "I'm doing what I believe is best," she said. "I love you, but this is my decision. I can't split my estate. It wouldn't be enough for Danielle to thrive the way she's capable of." It felt like the floor was crumbling beneath me. I wanted to scream that she was hurting me, that her logic made no sense. But all I managed was a shaky whisper. "What about all the help I've given you? Does that not matter?" She exhaled. "I appreciate you, I do. But Danielle's future depends on funding. You're fine. You have your bookstore job, your own place. You'll always manage." I stared at her for a long moment. Anger warred with heartbreak. Finally, I said, "I can't keep doing this, Mom. I can't keep playing nurse and maid for someone who doesn't value me." She flinched, a flicker of shock in her eyes, but then her mouth set in a firm line. "If that's how you feel, I won't stop you." The finality in her tone sliced me open. I expected her to beg me not to go, to say she needed me, but she just looked away. My throat burned, tears prickling behind my eyes. "Okay," I managed. "I'm done." Leaving her house, I felt like I was trudging through mud. Years of devotion weighed on my heart like a chain, but anger propelled me forward. When I got home, I ignored the phone. It rang and rang, my mother's name flashing on the screen, but I let each call die in voicemail. Maybe she needed her groceries or her laundry folded, but my patience was gone. In the days that followed, I skipped my usual visits. The first afternoon, I felt a pang of guilt, worried she'd fallen or needed medical attention. But then I remembered how she'd looked at me with that cold resolve, insisting Danielle deserved everything. I told myself it was time I looked after my own life. Old friends I hadn't seen in months invited me out for drinks, and for once, I said yes. I browsed in a thrift store on a Saturday morning, bought a novel I'd been meaning to read, and left my phone in my bag, ignoring the buzzing. There was a strange sense of liberation in choosing myself for once. Then Danielle flew back into town. I found out through her social media posts, which always seemed a bit too glossy for reality, a selfie at our local airport, her golden hair perfectly styled, captioned, "Back home to see my lovely mom." I almost threw my phone across the room. Soon after, she texted me, "Are you around? Mom says you haven't been visiting. Let's talk." I set the phone aside. I wasn't ready to talk to her either. A day passed before I caved and listened to my voicemails. Danielle's voice was smooth, practically dripping with condescension. "Hey sis, I'm in town, helping Mom. She's not doing great. I heard you just stopped coming. That's not cool. Can we discuss this?" She didn't mention the will. Maybe Mom hadn't told her I knew. Or maybe Danielle knew and didn't want to admit it. I didn't reply. Word got around that I was abandoning Mom. Our Aunt Linda called and scolded me. "How could you neglect her when she's so ill?" I wanted to shout the whole story, that I'd been neglected for years, that Mom intended to leave me scraps while Danielle got everything. But I wasn't in the mood for the drama. I let Aunt Linda's words wash over me, then hung up. My anger still simmered, but I felt a flicker of doubt too. Was I a monster for turning my back on an ailing parent, even if she was unfair? Eventually, Danielle cornered me at the bookstore where I worked. I was restocking a shelf when she strolled in, hair impeccable, wearing a designer coat that screamed money I didn't have. She shot me a tight smile and asked if we could talk privately. I led her to a quiet aisle. She folded her arms. "What's going on with you and Mom? She's been complaining that you've left her in the lurch." I bristled. "She told me she's leaving everything to you," I snapped. "So I said I'm done being her unpaid helper." Danielle's expression flickered, surprise mingling with guilt. "Look, I didn't ask her to do that," she said. "I'm not trying to take advantage. She just believes in my art career." My resentment swelled. "And she doesn't believe in me at all. You realize she's never valued anything I do, right?" Danielle sighed. "I get it, but she's our mother. She's sick. What if something happens to her?" A sliver of guilt stabbed through my anger. I remembered how frail Mom looked, how she struggled to walk. But then I pictured that line in her will, everything to Danielle, next to nothing for me. "I can't keep giving myself away for someone who considers me a footnote," I said quietly. "She's made her bed. She can lie in it." Danielle tried to negotiate a truce. "Can we at least sit down with her and talk? Let her explain?" I glared. "She did explain. She thinks your future is worth more than mine. I'm done playing the second fiddle. Despite our tense standoff, some part of me still felt a tug of concern. I wrestled with it all night. Memories of Mom's face, pale and tired, mingled with the recollection of her dismissiveness. By morning, I felt drained, uncertain. But my mind was made up. I wasn't going to resume my old role just because Danielle had waltzed back into town. A week passed. I heard from various relatives that Danielle was taking care of everything, arranging home health aides, driving Mom to doctor's appointments, cooking for her. A part of me was relieved that at least Mom wasn't alone. Another part felt uneasy, as if I'd abandoned my post. But every time the guilt flared, I reminded myself of that will. If that was how Mom wanted it, fine. She could rely on her golden child. Late one evening, my phone buzzed. Danielle's name flashed on the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. Her voice trembled. Mom collapsed again. She's in the hospital. It's bad this time. Heart complications. They're talking surgery. You should come. My stomach lurched. I'd been bracing myself for something like this, but I still wasn't prepared. I'll be there, I muttered, already grabbing my coat. When I arrived at the hospital, Danielle was pacing the hallway, eyes red. She didn't lecture me, she just gestured to the ICU doors. I entered to find Mom hooked up to monitors, pale as a sheet. The beep of the heart monitor felt like a hammer striking my chest. My anger drained away, replaced by a wave of fear. Mom opened her eyes, weakly. She saw me, and her lips trembled into something resembling a smile. You came, she murmured. I moved closer, swallowing hard. How could I not? I said, voice hoarse. Danielle stood on the other side of the bed, tears brimming in her eyes. The air was thick with all that had been left unsaid. The doctor explained that Mom needed urgent surgery to clear a blockage. There were risks involved, especially given her fragile health. They needed consent forms signed. I watched Mom's hand shake as she scribbled her name. She glanced up at us, eyes glistening. I don't want to leave anything unfinished, she whispered. I'm sorry. Danielle touched Mom's shoulder gently, tears slipping down her cheeks. In that sterile, white-walled room, my bitterness melted into a different kind of hurt. I realized how much I still loved my mother, despite everything. I wanted her to pull through, wanted a chance for us to bridge this terrible divide. They rushed her into surgery early the next morning. Danielle and I spent the night in the waiting room, each clutching cheap styrofoam cups of coffee, too nervous to speak. The hours stretched on. Occasionally, she and I would meet eyes, and I'd see my own fear reflected back. Whatever resentment we had, it paled next to the possibility of losing Mom for good. At dawn, a surgeon finally emerged, looking exhausted. He said the operation had gone as well as could be expected, but Mom was critical. We'd have to wait to see if her body healed. Danielle and I clung to each other, relief and worry mixing in equal measure. When they let us see Mom in the ICU, she was half-conscious, mumbling apologies. She squeezed my hand weakly, and I felt tears burning my eyes. Mom, I whispered, don't try to talk, just rest. She looked at me, and I saw regret there, deeper than any I'd seen before. I'm sorry, she mouthed again, lips trembling, voice barely audible under the oxygen mask. I nodded, tears slipping free. Danielle and I took turns sitting by her side. I tried to be strong, but the machines terrified me. IV lines, monitors, the beep and hiss of medical equipment. It all pressed on my nerves, reminding me how close we were to losing her. In those quiet hours, Danielle and I began to talk softly about our childhood. We laughed about the day Danielle was 7 and insisted on teaching me ballet in the living room and how I kept stepping on her toes. For the first time, it felt like we were equals, just two frightened daughters hoping our mother would survive. On the third day, Mom opened her eyes fully, and though she was groggy, she was coherent enough to talk. Danielle was out grabbing lunch, so I was alone at Mom's bedside. She motioned for me to lean closer. Her voice rasped. I had the lawyer come yesterday. I told him to change the will. The confession jolted me. I searched her face, seeing tears gathering in her eyes. I was too proud, too stubborn, she said. I thought you didn't need my help, that you'd be fine. But I realize now, I've taken you for granted. Emotions welled up, too big to contain. A part of me wanted to say it was too late, that she'd hurt me beyond repair. But another part, the child who'd always yearned for her love, wanted desperately to forgive her. "Mom," I managed, "just focus on healing." Her gaze stayed on me. "Please forgive me," she whispered. "I want to do right by you, both of you." I squeezed her hand. My throat was too tight to speak. At that moment, I realized that though I'd been furious, I still couldn't bear to lose her. If there was a chance to mend this rift, I wanted to take it. When Danielle returned, Mom repeated her confession, tears sliding down her cheeks as she clung to our hands. Danielle cried too, apologizing for any role she'd played in overshadowing me. I felt something loosen in my chest. For so long, I'd been trapped under the weight of Mom's favoritism, but seeing her frail and remorseful, I discovered that I didn't want revenge. I wanted a family that cared for each other. The surgeon warned us that Mom's recovery would be slow. She remained in the hospital for 2 weeks, and Danielle and I coordinated visits. We took turns bringing her clean pajamas, flowers, crossword puzzles. Aunt Linda visited as well, offering moral support. Sometimes I caught her eye, and I could see she was rethinking all the judgments she'd thrown my way. Maybe she realized there'd been more to the story than my supposed neglect. One quiet evening, Mom managed to speak a bit more about what she'd done. "I remember a day when you were 12, she said to me, "and I was sick with the flu. You made me tea and toast, then stayed home from your friend's birthday party to keep an eye on me. You've always been so steady. I thought you'd be fine no matter what. I guess I forgot you had feelings too." I bit my lip, tears brimming. I'd almost forgotten that particular memory. She hadn't, and that realization cracked something in me. Danielle gently touched my shoulder. "Mom's told me stories about how you'd always sacrifice for both of us," she said. "I'm sorry I never saw it as clearly as I should have." Her voice trembled with emotion, and I felt a surprising surge of affection for her. We'd been pitted against each other, but maybe we could find common ground in loving the same complicated woman. By the time Mom was stable enough to be discharged, she'd turned a corner in both health and humility. We helped settle her back home, the same small house that used to feel so suffocating to me. This time, though, the energy felt different. She let me and Danielle handle things without criticism or comparisons. She thanked me every time I brought her tea or tidied the living room. I caught her watching me with a sad expression, almost as if she were making amends in her mind for all the lost years. The new will arrived via courier a week after she got home. Danielle and I sat with her at the kitchen table, the three of us bracing ourselves. When I opened the folder, my heart thudded. It was equitable now, split evenly between me and Danielle. Mom had even penned a letter specifying that she hoped we'd use the inheritance wisely, but also that we'd remember to pursue our own happiness. Danielle looked from the document to me, tears in her eyes. I reached for her hand under the table. It felt like an uncertain truce was becoming something real. Still, a part of me worried that once Mom recovered, she'd slip back into old patterns. People don't change overnight. Yet, as the days went by, I saw genuine effort. She called me first sometimes, asked how I was feeling, listened to my answers. She still praised Danielle's talents, but not at my expense. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. A month after her surgery, she was stable enough to move around with a cane. We all gathered for a quiet dinner, just me, Danielle, and Mom. At one point, Mom said, "I'm thinking of signing up for a little local class, maybe watercolor painting or something for fun." The statement itself was innocent, but it made me smile because it meant she was trying to find new ways to connect with both of us without turning Danielle into the sole star. She was stepping into Danielle's world in her own small way. Danielle talked about returning to Europe to finalize a gallery show, but she promised she'd video call regularly and come back if Mom needed her. When she left a week later, she hugged me at the airport. "I know it'll take time for us to get past all the stuff that happened," she said, "but I want you to know I'm here if you ever need me. I'm proud of everything you've done." Surprised by the sincerity in her voice, I returned the hug. Now, I won't pretend everything turned perfect. Mom still has moments when she says something insensitive, and my old wounds throb. Danielle still gets showered with praise for her creativity. But there's a shift in how I respond. I no longer define myself by whether or not Mom approves. I've started taking art classes too, just for fun, for myself. When I showed Mom one of my drawings, she actually lit up with genuine appreciation. It's been a revelation to see that she can celebrate both of us in different ways, even if it took a near-death experience to get there. Occasionally, I catch myself looking back on those painful weeks when I decided I was done with Mom's demands. I remember the surge of anger that propelled me out of her house, and I feel a pang of sadness for all the time lost to bitterness. But I also understand it was necessary. My anger forced a reckoning none of us wanted to face. If I hadn't put my foot down, maybe she wouldn't have realized how much I was hurting. Some nights, I still lie awake wondering if it's all just temporary, if she'll revert to her old ways. But then I recall the moment in the hospital when she grabbed my hand, barely able to speak, and used her last bits of strength to whisper an apology. That image remains seared into my mind. People can surprise you, even after a lifetime of disappointments. As for the inheritance, it matters to me less than it once did. Yes, it's comforting to know I won't be left with absolutely nothing, but mostly it symbolizes that Mom finally acknowledges my worth. She sees me as someone deserving of a real place in her life. That's what truly soothes the old scars. If someone had told me months ago that we'd be in this place, talking, laughing occasionally, trying to navigate a healthier relationship, I wouldn't have believed them. I would have assumed it impossible for Mom to let go of her single-minded focus on Danielle. But here we are, proving that the unexpected can happen. I don't regret telling her I was done. For once, I stood up for myself, and in doing so, I gave us the chance to grow. The most surprising twist is that Danielle and I are closer than we've ever been. We text each other silly photos, share songs we're listening to, and exchange updates about Mom's progress. The old rivalry I felt has softened. She's not just the golden child anymore. She's my sister, with her own insecurities and struggles. I see that now. Maybe she always saw me as the reliable one, the strong one who could handle anything, just like Mom did. It's strange how those labels trap us all. It's been half a year since Mom's surgery, and she's doing surprisingly well. I still visit her regularly, but the visits feel different, lighter. She insists on making me tea or offering me cookies, even though she moves slowly, still recovering. When I walk into her house, I no longer feel that clench of dread in my chest. Instead, I feel a cautious sense of peace. Sometimes we talk about the years gone by, how I hid my resentment behind a pleasant face. She apologizes for the times she overlooked me. I apologize for not speaking up sooner, for letting the anger fester in silence. We're learning day by day that no relationship is perfect, but healing can happen if everyone is willing to face the truth. Maybe that's the real inheritance Mom is leaving me. Not money or property, but the knowledge that boundaries matter, that love needs to be balanced with respect. If I were to go back and warn my younger self, I'd tell her that she'd have to fight to be seen and that it might hurt like hell. But I'd also reassure her that sometimes stepping away is the only way to make someone realize your importance. I don't regret drawing that line in the sand. I don't regret shocking Mom out of her complacency. Because in the end, it brought us to a place where I can look at her and not feel invisible. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe there will be disagreements or awkward holiday gatherings. Maybe we'll slip into old patterns now and then, but I do know that something irrevocable has shifted. Mom finally sees me as more than just her backup. Danielle sees me as a partner, not an afterthought. And I see myself as someone who deserves respect and love in equal measure. For a long time, I thought I'd never get the apology I wanted. Maybe I couldn't have if I'd kept doing everything she asked without protest. Sometimes people need a shock to see the damage they've done. My ultimatum, my refusal to keep helping her, was that shock. It was born from anger, but it turned into something far more healing. I won't pretend the ending is purely happy or that all wounds are magically closed. Even so, there is a gentleness in our interactions now that I never thought possible. Mom's gaze softens when she looks at me, and Danielle's phone calls usually include a, "Hey, how are you really doing?" that I don't doubt anymore. Sometimes I stand in my own little kitchen, sipping tea by the window, and marvel at how close we came to letting bitterness consume us entirely. If Mom's heart hadn't nearly failed, if I hadn't decided I was done, we might have gone on with the same old toxic pattern until it was too late for any of us to say what we truly felt. People always talk about how tragedy can bring families together. I'm not sure if that's entirely true or if it's just an easy cliche. But I can say that a brush with tragedy forced us to confront something we'd been ignoring for years. And in that confrontation, we found the chance to mend. I'm sharing this story because I still wonder if someone out there might be living through something similar, feeling overlooked, seething with hurt, too afraid to speak. All I can say is that sometimes you have to walk away to be recognized as worthy of staying. It's a gamble, because not everyone will see your value even then. But if you don't claim your own worth, how can you expect anyone else to do it for you? Mom once told me she believed in Danielle's potential more than she believed in mine. That statement used to stab me in the heart. Now, it still stings, but I realize it was born of her own limited perspective, her own fears. She thought I was strong enough to endure anything, including her neglect. But she was wrong. I broke, but then I grew. And maybe she did too. In the end, all I really wanted was for Mom to see me as a person. Flawed, complicated, yet deserving of love. She finally does, in her way. Whether the changes to her will remain or not, I know I won't go back to being the dutiful daughter who never speaks her mind. I've found my voice, and it's not something I'm willing to lose again. So here we are, on the other side of the storm. Some days, I'll sit with Mom as she practices her watercolor brushstrokes, and she'll comment on how proud she is that I'm also exploring art now. She doesn't compare me to Danielle or belittle my efforts, she just smiles. That's enough of a miracle for me. A year ago, I would have given up hope of ever having this kind of moment. But sometimes, life surprises you. Sometimes the cracks let in just enough light to see a new path forward. I still remember the day I said those words. I'm done helping out. I expected it to be the end of everything, but strangely enough, it was the beginning of honesty, of change, of a fragile new start. If I hadn't walked away, none of us would have faced the painful truths that were poisoning our relationships. Now, though far from perfect, we're trying. And maybe that effort is what makes a family worth fighting for.